So we're talking about capital gains and all that that means when you're talking about estate planning. So a little bit of contact information there. The main office is in Richmond here on Main Street. That's the house I'm in. So you can see some of that woodwork and things from this historic house in the background. The website is there as well. But I want to say that there's a whole lot of other skill, knowledge, and commitment in this enterprise beyond just me. So you can see a picture of all the rest of the staff, several other attorneys, lots of legal assistants, and administrative professionals that help you through this process. So if you call us, you're going to get a whole team of people who are very skilled and will be able to meet your needs. I want to introduce a little bit about myself first. If you've never met me before, you'll know that I'm into historic preservation. A couple of the houses here in Richmond that I've restored and work on and love to show off. We do tours in all of them, and I hope you'll invite yourself to a tour. If you're interested in that, you can send any questions you have to the email address that delivered tonight's link to you. So info@Elder Law Guidance, and ask them to be put on the list for when the next tour will occur. My background is I am former military and was in the U.S. Army as an air traffic controller for 5 years, exited that, began full-time church work. And after 2 decades of that, because of some personal needs, I had to leave ministry and then later decided that I would become an attorney, which is a massive change in most people's minds, but it's been pretty seamless because all of the background I had in counseling and grief ministries and hospital visitation, death and dying, and all that sort of stuff, I get to use every single day in a practical way inside the law firm of helping families. I've served on the Kentucky Bar Elder Law section as its chairperson, served in every capacity in that group, and belong to a large network of people across the country. That matters because if you have specific questions about elder law or anything estate planning, of course, I'm a Kentucky attorney, but I can always get you attorneys who are qualified in a different state if you are trying to get help elsewhere. So, with that said, let's move right on along to the topic capital gains. What are capital gains? Capital gain taxes are the taxes that the IRS levies against us when we have a gain in an investment of any sort. So you can have a capital gain on stock, you can have capital gain on real estate, but when what that means is the investment, the capital gained value, it grew over time, and the government wants to capture taxes off of your gain. So let me illustrate it. Let's say I have a house. I buy the house, I keep it for a number of years, it increases in value. So when I sell it for more than what I purchased it for, that is the gain on my capital investment. And there is a tax rate of either 15% or 20% on that gain. And I'm going to illustrate that very clearly as we go through here. So essentially, it's just the profit made. The tax, when you're taxed on it, when the gain occurs. So if my house increases in value, I keep it 20 years, I don't pay taxes at all until I realize those. That means I sold the asset and now the increased value is actually cashed in. If it was stock and I had stock for 20 years, and I see it growing in value, I don't get taxed on that increase until I sell it. And then that's when it's realized. So most of the time, average folks, we're going to experience the largest capital gain on our house. Most of us don't have assets like stock or bonds or something like that that would increase in value nearly to the extent that our real estate would. So that's usually what most people are talking about and concerned about. So here is the rule on the exclusion for capital gains on your house. Realizing that the gain is the difference between the sell price and the purchase price, there's this other thing called basis. That's the amount that you purchased it for, but basis comes in later. And I'm going to bring that into the conversation too. So let's say that I have a house and I keep it only 1 year or stock only 1 year. I don't get any sort of gain exclusions. For a capital gain exclusion to attach on real estate, there is a very specific rule that I have to have had that house and used it as my residence. You cannot get a capital gain exclusion on investment property, only on your primary residence. You can only declare one primary residence at a time under these rules of gains exclusions, one at a time. And I must have lived in and used that as my residence 2 out of the last 5 years. Now, if all of that is true, then I get a capital gains exclusion, and that is $250,000 of the value of the gain gets excluded. If I'm a married person filed jointly, each spouse gets 250, so you could have 500,000 total gain excluded. Now, there are other exceptions to the rule, but that's the basic rule. If all of those things are true, then the gain exclusion applies. So let's say, I think I've got an illustration of this. Let's say I bought my house in 1950 for $100,000 and I sold it this year for $450,000. So that increased value means that I had a gain of $350,000. I get this $250,000 exclusion. And so all I owe, the $350,000 gain minus 250, is I only have a $100,000 taxable gain, which is going to be taxed for most people at 20%. In other words, I'm going to owe $20,000 in taxes on that gain. That's if all of the rules apply for me to get the exclusion. Now, the reason we're talking about this tonight and something that is extremely important in the estate planning world is if you know much about elder law, much about my firm or what we do, we focus a lot on nursing home benefits that are delivered through the Medicaid system. And a lot of people will try to avoid using an attorney. They get bad advice on other occasions, just get scared, don't know what to do. And so they try to work this Medicaid problem out themselves. And the Medicaid problem is that if you need nursing home care, Medicaid expects you to not have a home. They want you to sell your home, use the sale proceeds to pay for your own care before you come to them. So some people will transfer their house into their children's names. Their logic, I suppose, is my children are going to inherit my home once I've passed away. So why not go ahead and give it to them now? And that way, if I need the nursing home benefit through Medicaid, I won't be forced to sell my home. That's why this capital gain matters so much, because if I give my home to my child, the child does not get this capital gain exclusion that I'm talking about here on this slide. They don't get that $250,000 exclusion. So what that means is they have the $100,000 purchase that I made as the basis. I gave it to them. They don't receive it at today's fair market value. If and when they ever go to sell the home, it's going to go back to the basis of when I purchased it. So let's say I gave that house to my children a few years ago, and those my children then decide to sell the home at this point, let's say 2025, for $450,000. There is the $350,000 increase, the basis of when I purchased it, and today's sell price of $450,000, a $350,000 gap there. Because they get no exclusion, that $250,000 set aside that I have there, they're going to be taxed on the $350,000 increase at 20%, which means they're going to pay $70,000 in taxes. So people giving their house to their children, you can see, is a terrible problem. In this scenario, if my wife and I had sold the house, we would have still paid taxes on a $100,000 gain. I'm sorry, if I'd sold it as a single person, I would have still paid taxes on a $100,000 gain. In other words, a $20,000 tax bill But if I give it to my children and they sell it, they don't get any sort of exclusion. They get taxed at $70,000, much steeper tax rate, all because they didn't get good advice or they were given poor advice here. So this is the number one tax pitfall that people get into. And you can imagine how frustrated you would be if you sold a home thinking you had done the right thing, and now all of a sudden you have a $70,000 tax bill. That's going to hurt no matter who you are, right? So hopefully that helps you see what we're talking about on this capital gain. Let me talk about the tax rate for a second. If your filing status is single, we're going to use the same scenario that there was a $100,000 taxable gain. Now, what we're trying to do using this chart is figure out how much taxes are applied to that $100,000 gain. So if I am a single person and my income is $0 to $48,000, then I'm going to have a zero filing status, and it's possible I'd have no gain at all, right? No taxable gain at all, right? No, that's not right. If I'm in this category, the $100,000 gain gets imputed to me as income. So now I go to a $100,000 income level. So you can see I am in this 15% category. If that doesn't make sense, this is a great time to raise a hand, type something in the chat, unmute yourself, because I want you to understand this. This is the way the tax gets imputed. So even if I'm on Social Security, I pay no annual income tax, and I have this taxable gain of $100,000, I'm going to be paying 15% tax on the 100. In other words, $15,000 in taxes. Now, if I did have, let's say I have some Social Security, but I also have a pension from GM or Ford Motor Company, something like that. And so I have an income that's reported in the 48 to $50,000 range, this center column, plus the $100,000 gain. You can see I'm going to be at $150,000 reportable income for that year, but it still is going to keep me in this 15% range. I would have to have an awfully large tax increase on the house itself. The gain would have to be in excess of $500,000. So you would think, oh, well, Scott, then no one's going to be paying the 20% taxable gain on the house, right? No, not at all. Let's go back to my scenario for just a moment. I want to show you where this comes up. Let's say I'm the child. My dad gives me his house, and he had purchased it for 100,000. We sold it for 400,000, 450,000. So our gain is 350, right? So Scott is going to pay taxes on $350,000 additional income. If I was already making $200,000 plus the 350 income from the sale of the house, my income would have been 550,000, pushing me into the 20% range on this chart. Or since I am married, my wife and I together make in the range of $250,000 plus 350. We're going to bust the 600 level. We're going to pay this higher tax rate as well. So it is not uncommon for me to see lots of people get into a very high percentage tax. Let's see what the tax is going to be. 20% on a $350,000 gain. That's that $70,000 tax bill all over again. So that's where this really comes into hurt families. I remember when I first started practicing, I had a mentor, was a very well-respected estate planning trust attorney, fantastic attorney. And I was trying to learn from her, and I went and saw one of her reviews. She had an online review where somebody was just complaining about how awful she had been as an attorney for them. And I knew that wasn't true. I knew this lady was a great attorney. This was the exact issue. They gave her a 1-star review, said they would tell everybody about how bad she was. And it's simply because they got hit with a taxable gain that was really high like this. And I assume it was not broken down, explained thoroughly enough, or perhaps just if things are too confusing, we tend to put them out of our mind. The fact is, this does seem a little complicated. It is something I would always encourage you to go get a CPA or an attorney involved in, because anytime you're going to get a $70,000 bill, you're really going to be bothered by it. But I want to remind us a couple more things about this capital gain rule. You do have to have lived in the house 2 out of the past 5 years. It does have to have been your personal residence. It can't be an investment property. However, there's a couple of other things that can be used to your advantage on this. You can reclaim the gain every 2 years. Since the rule is I only have to have lived in the house 2 of the past 5 years, if I live in the house 2 years and sell it, I can take advantage of the full credit, the $250,000 rule. With my spouse, I could do $500,000, sell it at 2 years, take on another personal residence, sell it again, get another $500,000 of tax exclusion, sell it again. This is one way people build wealth. And if you do that every 2 years, just for 10 years, you think about what you have saved. If you max the gain exclusion out at 500,000 and you did it every 2 years for a 10-year period, that means you've done it 5 times. 500,000, 5 times, that's $2.5 million worth of tax savings. Now, most of us don't even think in terms of millions of dollars, but $2.5 million worth of profit you could have made. This helps us understand when you see advertisements, television, or just hear stories about people who flip houses to become wealthy. This is why. You're taking advantage of the tax law. Instead of hating taxes, your taxes are in your favor, right? Because you make all this profit tax-free and you don't pay anything. So it's a very, very rule if you understand it. It's a terrible rule if you don't understand it and it comes back to haunt you. Now, I want to talk about a couple more exceptions. You have to live in the house every 2 years. However, there are other exceptions if you did not live in the house 2 years and you had to sell it shorter, more quickly than 2 years, because perhaps there was a divorce, your spouse passed away and you had to sell it more quickly. That exception allows you to still take advantage of the gain. If you're in the military and you've got to move more quickly than that, when I was in the military, I moved 4 times in 5 years. You can take advantage of the tax rule that way. There are other ways to get around this. I won't go through every one of them, but a 1031 exchange. I could take the property, take the gain, invest it in the next property, and I don't have to pay tax on the gain. I'm just rolling it forward year after year after year. It works even on investment properties, rental properties, as long as this type of property is equivalent to the new type of property. There has to be a similarity. So a residential rental, sell it and purchase a new residential rental. If, on the other hand, it was a commercial hotel, I sell it and I go buy a convenience store, you can't get the 1031 exchange on that. There has to be a particular matchup. But you say eventually you're going to pay the tax, right? You're just rolling it forward. No. What if it is a residential property and I roll it forward and then I live in it for 2 years just before I sell it? Then I could take advantage of the gain exclusion on the final end as well, and perhaps avoid, if not all, a large part of the taxes, because I could get the full $500,000 exclusion if my wife was still alive at the time. So a lot of exceptions to this rule. Let me give a chance. Does this raise any questions? If you'd like to ask me something, I feel like I'm throwing a lot at you, and I'm happy to try to make it clearer. If you have a question or comment or anything, just unmute and I will help you. I'll go ahead and keep on going. If you do have something come to mind, please unmute and ask me, or type there in the chat. Either one works just great for me. I want to go back to the Medicaid thing that caused a little bit of confusion here. Often people think that spin down, if you've ever heard that phrase, is required, that there's no way around it. Um, there is not true. There is a way to keep the capital gain exclusion. You don't have to sell your house. You don't have to do any spin down regarding the house. If we plan far enough in advance, 5 years in advance, the house can be placed in a trust, and the trust will allow you to keep your capital gains exclusion. It'll also allow you to keep your property tax exclusion, your homestead exemption as someone post 65 years old. So those are all very good things that can be done here. The the other thing is, well, Scott, I might not have 5 years. There are still ways to do this. Not always is it 100% the case that you'll be able to avoid some of the tax issue, but we always want to weigh it out. Does this method save us more money, and how much tax does it cost? You want to be look at the savings and the taxes and see which one is the better route to take on any approach you do. There would have to be a whole lot of other problems occurring for us to say $70,000 worth of capital gain is the best way to go. Most of the time, the taxes are going to be the bigger consequence to face. So that's usually a misconcept. People are just really, really concerned. Taxes are to be avoided at all costs. We're sort of taught that from early adulthood, and oftentimes taxes are not unmitigatable. I have a hard time of thinking of a better way to explain that, but taxes can usually be kept very, very low, and we shouldn't try to avoid them altogether. We just want to pay the lowest possible tax instead of the higher possible tax. So, um, makes most sense of this thing I'm trying to describe is 401ks and IRAs. Those are tax deferred. We've invested in my IRA or my 401k all of these years while I was working, and I do so tax free. I don't have to pay any income tax on that amount if I'm putting it into my 401k, and then I'll let it grow. When I start taking that money out, I now have to pay taxes on it. Most people that I talk to are not aware of that. They thought it was going to be tax free forever. No, you are required at age 72 and one half to start taking the money out. The government dictates that you must take out a certain amount so that it will liquidate over your projected lifetime. You do have to pay taxes on it at that point. You can then reinvest it if you choose to do so. But in a lot of circumstances, I will work people through discerning whether or not taking the money out earlier and paying the taxes earlier will actually save you money. And in the end, paying taxes sooner rather than later will mean you have to pay fewer taxes. But you always have to do the calculation to see which way is the better way. So, and that's another one of those misunderstandings about taxation and spin downs and those sorts of things. To your question, I'll come to it as soon as I finish this slide. Thank you for putting that in there. That's great. Um, so what triggers the taxes? The growth doesn't. Even the transfer to a trust or transfer into, let's say, my children's names triggers the tax. And it's only the tax proceeds. If some of it had to be reinvested to do improvements on it or other things can cause the tax basis to be lower. One other thing, a little detail we need to incorporate here. If I keep my house until I pass away, I didn't sell it, but there's a benefit by me keeping it in the estate, even if I keep it in my trust and let the trust transfer it to my children after my passing. They get an automatic step up in basis. So what that means is I bought the house at 100,000. I kept it all of my life, and when I pass away, it's the 450,000. The children inherit it at the $450,000, and it gets leveled up to the fair market value at the time of death if I let them inherit it. If I give it to them one day before I die, they take it at $100,000 and they have the $350,000 gain. If I let them inherit it, then they take it at 450, they have zero gain. and therefore zero capital gains taxes. Even if it's not their primary residence, they get a stepped up basis and all the tax goes away. Now, President Trump in his big, beautiful bill was fighting very hard to eliminate the capital gain altogether, that you would never pay a capital gain tax. You can understand that because he's always been a real estate investor. He wants to save money for real estate investors. On the other hand, has been the strongest of all of the congressional people seeking to increase the taxable gain and increase the rates. I'm not picking sides here. I could say something good about every president and presidential candidate and something bad about every single one of them. All I want us to do is be educated, because most of the time, these are not the issues that people talk about when they're running for office. And it is a place that hurts the citizens most. Taxes are what's going to hurt me and you more than anything else. Sometimes benefits are the second thing behind that. So it really does pay to get deep into the weeds and try to see what is their tax plan behind their other things they're running on their platform about. So, but before I do, I'm going to go back to Miss. I inherited a farm from my parents over 10 years ago. Want to pass it on to a non-relative. How do I handle this? I believe you need to go see an estate planning attorney for sure. I'd love to help you on it, or I can give you a referral to somebody else. Here's kind of involved. I can't give you every detail because there's more that I would need to know. But if you use this in a trust, you're going to avoid a lot of other taxes. On this one, here's the problem with it. Giving it, of course, would trigger the capital gain. If you pass it on to a non-relative in your will, there's going to be a stepped up basis, so you're going to avoid the capital gain. But what is not avoidable if you just let it be inherited through your will is Kentucky is going to put a tax on it. It's a graduated tax, but it's going to go up to 16% on the value of the farm. Now, knowing a little bit about a farm, that is probably going to be worth several $100,000. Let's say $500,000. $500,000 passed through will and probate to your non-relative person you're wanting to inherit means that they're going to be taxed at 16% on it. Therefore, they're going to have an $80,000 tax bill on the $500,000 farm. Now, the question is, when is that due? It's due as part of the probate estate before the property could even be transferred. So if the person you want to leave this to doesn't have $80,000 cash, or you don't have $80,000 set aside in your probate to pay the tax bill for them, oftentimes what ends up happening is they have to sell off part of the acreage in order to pay the tax bill before they can ever claim the land. And I'm sure that's not what you want to have happen. So I'm going into detail about that so you can understand you can't just do this through your will. Of course, you don't want to do it just by giving it to them, because the higher capital gain is going to apply. You have to use a trust. Just no way around it. The farm needs to be in the trust. The trust stipulates at the end of my life, I want this farm to go to my friend. And that way you avoid all the tax issue. Absolutely have to use that method. There is no other method. Be somebody who understands trust well, and they will help you through that. But you'd see that's golden nugget, right? You otherwise be looking at something in the neighborhood of $100,000 or more in taxes by the time you have the capital gain and the Kentucky inheritance tax side by side. Great, great. Thank you for asking that. One more slide to go. I'll give you some final thoughts. This is another good place. If anybody else has another question, to type in the chat or just unmute yourself. I'm happy to answer those. I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about other things here. This is a way for you to give us some feedback. I believe this QR code, this would probably take you to my website. But I always like to ask people to do Google if you're so inclined. That helps us out so much, because giving a Google review will tell the internet to share the message anytime I have a free webinar out with more and more people. A Google review helps the internet spread the word of these free workshops or webinars that I do. So you could take a picture of that code right there on the front of, all you have to do is hold your camera up to that little code, hit that button, and then it takes you over to a place where you could leave a review. And I just checked it to make sure that it is working. Put a rating in there, write a little message and say, these are great. He takes time and explains, or you can complain and say he's confusing and he's even as funny as he thinks he is, or whatever you want to say. But I'd appreciate that. It helps other people if you want to do that. Now, let me go back and wrap up with final thoughts. You can see here the website, the phone number to call. If you need to have anything further explained to you, you can write us an email back in that same email that you received tonight's link. Okay, so thoughts. Don't give your property to your children prior to passing away. Let it go through the estate or through a trust. That'll save all the capital gains. Don't ever feel pressured or panicked about needing to sell the home in order to qualify for healthcare benefits. You don't have to do that. You need to see a solid, credible elder law attorney, and they can help you get through that without losing your home. It's never too late. Don't ever think, well, that 5-year look back, I can't do this. It's never too late. There's always a way. And I've done the math year after year after year on this. I can save, even if you've missed the 5 years, you're needing it, the help right now today, you're in a crisis, I can still save 70% of everything you've got. And if your spouse is still alive, a married couple, I can save 100% of everything you have. So please don't ever think that's a problem. You can always get legal help and solve the problem. Need to be able to get to the right people. So you can call us anytime. Our consultations are free. We'll put you on a path as to seeing the best way to help you get to where you need to go. But protect your home and assets. You've worked your entire life for them, and you can preserve them. You just got to get expert help on how to do that. And part of the thing that distinguishes our firm is I'm very tax conscious. We go into deep about the taxes where some other firms just don't do that. So I'm so thankful you were here tonight. Thank you for taking time out of your Thursday night to be with me. If there's anything I can do for you, please call, set up an appointment, ask my staff. Well, you don't have to come see me. If you can get help by just giving us a free phone call, we'll tell you go to this resource or go to that resource. You will remain on the list to continue to get updates for new webinars that are coming up. I do 2 a month all the time. And if you can and are so inclined, please leave us a Google review. It helps us help other people. And that's the only reason I would ever ask for them. So again, thanks for being here. I appreciate your question, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care now.